Welcome to the Stoic Edge, the podcast for managers and leaders who are ready to lead differently, to think differently, and to be different in the best possible way. Over the course of this series, we're going to introduce you to a way of thinking about leadership and management that is simultaneously the oldest idea in the world and the most urgently needed idea of the 2020s. Before we go anywhere, I want to be upfront with you about something. This podcast is not going to give you a 5-step shortcut to being a great manager. It isn't going to promise you a silver bullet or a magic framework that transforms everything overnight. No, what it's going to do, if you stay with it, if you generally engage with it, is something far more valuable than any shortcut. It's going to give you clarity. And in a business world that grows more complex, more demanding and more relentless with every passing year, clarity is the rarest and most powerful resource that a leader and manager can possess. So, let's talk about stoicism. Because I know that word can make people feel nervous. It sounds academic. It sounds cold. It sounds like something you'd study in a university lecture hall, not something you'd apply in a Monday morning team briefing. But here's what stoicism actually is, and I really want you to hold on to this. Stoicism is a practical philosophy of action. It was never designed for the classroom. It was designed for life, for pressure, for uncertainty, for the moments when everything is moving fast and the decisions you make genuinely matter. It was developed by men and women who faced real-world challenges that would make most modern business crises look modest. Emperors managing vast empires, advisors navigating political betrayal, leaders who had to make decisions that affected millions of lives, often with incomplete information, under enormous personal risk. And the philosophy they built, refined over centuries, tested in the fire of real human experience, is as relevant today as it's ever been. In fact, I'd argue it's more relevant today than at any point in the last 2,000 years. Because the 21st century business environment demands exactly what Stoicism develops: the ability to think clearly when everything around you is unclear. Now, I want to introduce you to something that sits at the very heart of this podcast. A framework that takes the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, brings it into the language of modern leadership. A model that gives you not just philosophy to believe in, but a practice to live by. We call it the radical model. And the reason we call it radical isn't because it's extreme. It's because each letter represents a core principle, a principle rooted in Stoic philosophy that, when applied consistently, transforms the way you lead. Let's walk through it. The R of radical is resilience. The Stoics believed that resilience wasn't something you either had or didn't have. It was something you built, deliberately, consistently, through daily practice and conscious reflection. In modern leadership, resilience isn't just about bouncing back from setbacks. It's about building the kind of mental foundation that means the setbacks don't knock you as far off course in the first place. It's about training for the difficult days before they arrive, so that when they do, and they will, you'll be ready. The A of radical is for awareness. Now, the Stoics were obsessed with self-knowledge. Marcus Aurelius, probably one of the most powerful men who ever lived, spent his private hours in deep, honest self-examination. His journal, which we now call Meditations, reads like a leader holding up a mirror to themselves and refusing to look away. Well, in 21st century management, self-awareness is the foundation of everything. It's what separates the manager who reacts from the manager who responds. It's what allows you to understand your own triggers, your own biases, yes, your own patterns, before they cost you a relationship, a team member, or a decision that you can't take back. The D is for discipline. Now, this isn't the rigid, joyless discipline of someone grinding through life, but the purpose discipline of someone who knows exactly what they value and structures their daily actions around those values. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and became one of the greatest philosophical voices in the ancient world, taught that discipline is the gateway to freedom. But the person who controls their own mind, their own responses, their own habits, is the freest person alive, regardless of their circumstances. For today's manager, that means building daily habits of reflection, of focused thinking, of intentional communication, even when the diary is full and the inbox is overflowing. The I of radical is for integrity. Now, the Stoics had a word, virtue, that sits at the core of their entire philosophy. And virtue, in the Stoic sense, isn't about being morally perfect. It's about being whole, about your actions matching your values, about leading in a way that you could defend not just to your board, but to your line manager and to yourself at the end of a long day when no one else is watching. In a world where trust in management is at a historic low, integrity is not just a moral value, it's actually a competitive advantage. The letter C is for clarity. We've already touched on this, but it deserves its own moment. The Stoic practice of objective representation, that is, seeing things as they actually are, stripped of the emotional narrative that we wrap around them, is one of the most powerful mental skills that a leader can develop. When your team is in panic, when the project is off the rails, when the numbers don't look right, the manager or leader who can see the situation clearly, calmly, and accurately is the manager who solves the problem every time. Clarity is not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. The letter A is for adaptability. Marcus Aurelius led Rome through plague, through war, through political intrigue, and personal tragedy. One of the most striking things about his writing is how consistently he returned to one idea. Change is not the enemy. Resistance to change is. The Stoics embraced impermanence. They understood that the world was always shifting, always surprising, always throwing up new challenges, and that the wise leader doesn't waste energy fighting that reality. They flow with it, adapt to it, and find the opportunity within it. In the 2020s business landscape, where disruption is not the exception but the rule, adaptability is not a nice to have. It's a survival skill. The final letter, L, is for legacy. Now, the Stoics thought deeply about how they wanted to be remembered, not out of vanity, but out of a genuine conviction that the quality of your character, not your achievements, not your titles, not your salary, is the truest measure of a life well led. As a manager or leader, your legacy is being written right now, in every conversation you have with a team member who's struggling, in every decision you make when it would be easier to take the shortcut, and in every moment where you choose to respond with wisdom rather than react with frustration. Your leadership legacy is not what you build. It's who you build it with and how. So, there it is. Radical. Resilience, awareness, discipline, integrity, clarity, adaptability, legacy. 7 principles, 7 ancient ideas made completely, urgently modern. And here's what I'd like you to understand, really understand, not just intellectually, but felt, before we go any further. These are not ideals reserved for the great leaders of history. They're not reserved for the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies or the author of best-selling business books. They're available to you right now, in your role, in your team, in your organization, whatever size it is, whatever industry you're in, wherever you are in your leadership or management journey. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be intentional, to show up every single day with the commitment of being just a little bit better, a little clearer, a little calmer, a little bit more deliberate than you were the day before. And over time, that compound interest of daily improvement becomes something remarkable, something your team feels, something your organization reflects, something that quietly and powerfully defines your management. Here's my challenge to you. I want you to pick just one of the radical principles, the one that spoke to you most today. And I want you to carry it with you into your working week, not as a theory, as a practice. Notice the moments when it shows up. Notice when it's hard to apply. Notice what happens when you manage to apply it anyway, because that's where the real learning happens. Not in the listening, but in the living. And what does this mean in management terms? Focus on one thing deeply and let it change you. That is how transformation actually works. This is the radical Stoic. This series is going to take you places that most leadership programs never go, deep into the philosophy, the practice, and the person behind the title on the door. Episode by episode, principle by principle, we're going to build something together, a new kind of leadership, one that's grounded, purposeful, resilient, and genuinely human. The ancient Stoics changed the world by changing themselves first. Now, it's your turn. Subscribe now to the Stoic Edge. Share it with fellow managers who need to hear it, and come back each week, because the journey is just beginning and it's worth every step. Until then, lead with clarity, act with purpose, and remember, the world doesn't need more managers. It needs more radical ones.